All right, so we're going on a little walk here. We need to talk about advertising and artificial intelligence. Specifically, I want to bring up a patent, U.S. patent 7,881,988 B2. This patent was patented in 2011. Now, what this patent allows is for a company, a retail store that sells any kind of product to basically figure out when someone has picked something up or put it down in the store. Now, of course, this is RFID technology. This is something we're all well familiar with. Initially created as a way to for loss prevention, prevent theft of products. Great. Now, what we don't realize is how the technology has advanced and how it's currently being utilized in artificial intelligence inferencing. To give you an example that happened yesterday, my wife and I went to a Marshall's. We were walking around the store looking at clothes, and we passed by a specific, just a random aisle, a random shelf with some products on it. She had picked up a shirt, talked about it a little bit. It was something nice. She put it down. We left. Within 2 hours, she had an Instagram ad with that exact shirt, prompting her to buy it. And we started talking about that, and begging the question, well, how would they even, the royal they, how would they even know what you looked at in a store? And it's important to consider because, especially nowadays with artificial intelligence, there's lots of ways that information is being inferenced in order to identify people. We look at examples like Flock, right, where it's a surveillance system. It's not supposed to technically do facial recognition, but it does because it identifies specific features, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's facial recognition technology, blah, blah, blah. You chat with any AI system from the US, and it's going to try and gaslight you on that. But the reality is, if you are using any kind of technology in order to identify a person, that is what you're doing. Especially when that can be put to a face. You're doing some background, inadvertent way of doing facial recognition without using a specific facial recognition software. So how did we manage to get into the situation where we looked at something, barely touched it, and get an ad on it 2 hours later? I started investigating, and I found there's a couple possible options, both equally dystopian, one more likely than the other. Not to say that the other is impossible, but there's no proof that the other is happening now. So the first, more far-fetched one, is that somehow systems have a way of tracking security surveillance information, and then figuring out where you are in a store, what you are specifically looking at, and using facial identification in order to trace that back to, send it back to a data center. Say Meta, right, because Instagram, they pull that surveillance information, and then they use facial features, facial recognition software in order to identify you specifically, figure out that you're looking at a specific product, send you the ad. Now, that's dystopian, but it's not far-fetched at all because all of the technology does exist. What doesn't exist is the legal ability to do that. Of course, it means basically nothing these days, because companies have ways to get around that, such as it's not technically facial recognition software, so it doesn't really count. And of course, I chat with AI about this as well to see what it's willing to actually talk about and what it's not. And what you would find is that it immediately gets extremely defensive whenever you try and talk about the surveillance that's happening with artificial intelligence. Specifically, if you ask it about Flock, I've never seen a system more defensive other than DeepSeek, which is super defensive of the Chinese Communist Party, right? But that's the level of defensiveness that Claude at least gets when you start talking about flock. That's a red flag. So if it's not that, if that's not the legal route, if let's say, playing devil's advocate only slightly, that's not what the companies are doing, then how are they getting the information of when you walk by some product, you don't have your phone out, pick something up and look at it for a second, put it down, you leave, you have an ad 2 hours later? The only other option involves U.S. patent 7,881,988 B2. This patent, made in 2011, allows for RFID technology to be pinged back and forth with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signals throughout the store, so that a product location within the store is known and identified. And when that product is lifted, so we're talking about human body sensors within this RFID technology. This is not it's not a joke, it's not a sci-fi thing, this is real, is active, was patented in 2011. That is, what is that, almost what year is it now? 2026. So 15 years ago, that technology was already conceived and patented. And here we are 15 years later, right? And that technology is in effect, and this is what it's doing. But we, the consumer, are completely unaware, because that wasn't something we could conceptualize back in 2010. We weren't even thinking about that. But the companies, the corporations were. And now that these things are in effect, we look at it in the same way that we looked at cloud technology when it first came out. When we looked at it and we heard, oh, well, there's this new thing called the cloud. It's going to be able to store your information, and it'll just be stored up somewhere in the cloud, right? You don't need to know where it is coming from. And all of a sudden we started seeing ads following us throughout our lives on Google. Everywhere you went, suddenly you have relevant ads. We know this now as ad choices, which is connected to your Google accounts. And anywhere you sign in on your Google account, that location is pinged, the things that are around you are pinged, anything that you've liked or messaged about or conversated about, all of those things are stored or have been stored as data points that then get pushed to advertising, because they purchase the rights to that information, because you're writing it away, giving it away just by using the services such as Instagram. And that gives the companies the legal right to inference your information, to use machine learning, which is what the algorithm is, and figure out what it is you like and might buy and might be interested in looking at. Now, this is a level of manipulation on a social level that is dangerous when you're unaware of it. So you might think that the things you see or that are presented to you are somehow coincidence, or worst case scenario that they are a sign from God, right? But really, it's not a sign at all. It is a deliberate, for lack of a better term, attack on your psyche, because there are patterns that can be derived about you from your interaction with people, places, and things. Patterns that you yourself are unaware of, that are relatively easy to identify to a computer. Now, I'm not even talking about artificial intelligence yet. I'm still just talking about machine learning. Machine learning is what allows that to happen. Artificial intelligence is a subset of machine learning. It's not a magic thing. It's just functions. It's just mathematical probability theory functions, sigmoids and derivatives that pass back and forth over many epochs in order to identify whether or not something is likely. This is stuff I know because not only am I studying it, I'm in a graduate program now for cybersecurity and public policy. So these are things that I have to look at on a regular basis, and I have over a decade of experience in quality assurance for software and hardware. So I know how machines learn and think. It's my job to break those kind of perspectives in a machine. So I do know how this stuff works, and I'm able to very quickly figure out why and how things happen. It's called root cause analysis. So why is this relevant? Because even before artificial intelligence, systems have already been created, and we know, you know, I know, that systems are already in place that are watching you, that are following you, and not in the same way that a person would watch or follow you. It's right here. It's your phone. It's literally your phone. So how are they able to do this with, you walking into a store without pulling out your phone and know exactly what item? Well, there's one technology right there. The RFID is built into this tag that's hidden on this item that you've picked up. And then how does it tie back to you? If not security cameras, your phone itself, just by having location services active on any app really, can piggyback in order to identify where you are in a store. This is also technology that is actively used by retailers, even as small as Marshall's, a place you would look at and say, this place is so not busy that it's probably impossible that they even have any kind of security to prevent theft or loss of items, much less any kind of advanced system to identify what it is you might purchase and pitch it to you later. That's false. The problem is that everyone, all of these corporations, are working together for our demise, right? For our dollar, every single dollar that we have. So this RFID technology at the high level, the C-suite level, this stuff is known. The companies are specifically putting in trackers in order to track where every person who comes into the store move around. That data goes where? To a data center. Exactly. So it goes directly to a data center, which is common, as well as the security footage. And that data center is not typically owned by a Marshalls. For instance, Marshalls owned by TJX. TJX uses Azure. Azure is Microsoft, right? And other places use, Amazon, whatever. Whoever the data center owners are, these are third parties, and third parties come with different contracts. So now we have a third party who is privy to all of the information that's been sent to it, to its data center. And those third parties all have artificial intelligence systems. Now, I'm not even going to say LLMs, because yes, they have LLMs, but that is not the only form of artificial intelligence. I personally have just created an LLM to analyze, flower petals. It was an assignment I had to do in my courses. So an LLM does not have to respond to you in any sort of reasonable human speech. All it has to do is calculate proper probabilities. And all you have to do for the information in the data center is to use both supervised and unsupervised learning in order to create clusters of information that appear relevant. And that's fairly easy to do. If you say this cluster relates to a person and that person has these particular interests, you can very quickly narrow that down to, let's say, 1,000 people. How do you narrow it down further? Okay, well, this person lives in this general area. You've now narrowed it down to 100 people, say. How do you narrow it down further? This person only goes to this shop on Wednesdays and Thursdays. You've narrowed it down even further to maybe 10, 20 people, right? There are ways always to narrow your search to identify a specific individual. And once you've done that, you can send them whatever you want. You can send them an advertisement on an app that they use frequently that sends advertisements for a particular product, right? And corporations pay for those marketing dollars, those ads, right? So the whole point I'm making here is that something that seemed like magic, right? The instance where you walk into a store or you drive by something that slightly interests you and you get an ad on it, and then you wonder, am I crazy? You're not crazy. The world is, the system is, the corporations are. They have literally put themselves together in allegiance to share every level of information from where I'm walking right now, which pings satellites and it pings cell phone towers, all of that information, and IP address, etc., pinpoints your exact location. Every Wi-Fi that I walk by that I don't notice, my phone is always scanning for to make sure I can connect to Wi-Fi if it's nearby, right? Every single one of those things collects your information, such as your MAC address on your computer, your phone, your watch, etc. And all of that information, while innocuous, can then be used against you if any corporation decides that they want to use that information to identify where you are, when you are, how you are, what you're looking at, what you might be looking at, things you've purchased before that might be nearby, things that are new for that store that might interest you according to your likes and your interests on your Instagram, your Facebook, your YouTube watches. All of these companies work together to share that information so that they can share your money. It sounds dystopian, but I have not described anything that has not already been in existence for the last 15 to 20 years. This stuff has already been in existence. It's already been working. There's already lawsuits on every major social media platform about how the algorithms are designed to be addictive. We all know it's not good for kids. Why do we know that? Well, because we see the effects. Because lawyers have already discussed the effects. Because every company has been sued over these effects, and no one wins those lawsuits. They lose, they pay a fee, they continue the process because the fees just aren't enough. This is why I'm going into policy. It's because these companies cannot continue to get away with the blatant exploitation of every single human being on the planet. Now, artificial intelligence is not something to be trifled with. It is an excellent and wonderful tool that in the hands of the user, the individual, can do great things. It can bridge knowledge gaps like you wouldn't believe. It is not something to be shied away from. Most people who are shying away from this technology, they're missing out on improvements, quality of life improvements for themselves, because they think that if they don't use it, it's going to somehow go away. But I've said this before. Artificial intelligence is not updated, it's grown. The data increases. No matter what we do, no matter how much we protest, it's not going to go away because it's already been ingrained in the system. This is not different from what China did. They set up a system where it was a complete surveillance state. Everyone knew this, and that system was then used to track the movements and the actions and the interests of every citizen, so that if someone liked a post or mentioned something against the government or participated in a protest, they would be able to identify where that person was at any given time and then send the police to come and pick them up. This is real. This is not speculation. This is how China worked for a very long time. We knew this. As a country, we knew this. We studied this. Right? And now the US is doing exactly that. And while it may appear that China is kind of backing down and making things right by the users, right, and reducing surveillance, they aren't. The only difference is now they've accomplished their goal of fully ingraining all systems through their own surveillance system. What that means is now it doesn't matter if you're offline or if you're chatting and the police aren't coming to your door, you're still being watched. China did not have a system before that could do that. So they had to break everything down, all of the infrastructure, in order to set up a system where there is nothing that is encrypted. They went out their encryption first. And that's what the US has in turn done. We're now destroying every possible system we can in order to set up artificially intelligent surveillance systems. And they're going to continue doing it until they're done. And once they're done, that's when they say, oh, you know what? We've listened to you. We've heard your concerns. We're going to stop now. And are they? They're going to stop the destruction of your systems, sure, but it's because they're already in, right? They rebuilt it from the ground up. The foundation is now one of surveillance. That's what the US is doing. On the consumer level, of course, the companies that are working on these artificially intelligent systems are pushing towards what's called artificial general intelligence. And the idea is that eventually, with enough information or with access to all information, then you can just know everything about everyone. And when greed is put into that, then you get systems that are looking for every possible opportunity to convince and manipulate the masses to give up their money to the people who own these systems. That's why scrolling is addicting. That's why you can't seem to put down Instagram or TikTok, right? It's because every time you look at something, the amount of time you spend looking at it tells them how much you're interested. The like tells them how much you're interested. The comment tells them how much you're interested. The friend who looked at it tells them how much you're interested. You can figure out what someone's going to watch. If they always watch something that is posted or said by this person, they're going to send you everything that's posted or sent by that person. These are very basic ideas that are extremely easy to implement. And when you compile all of those possibilities, all of those probabilities, you get a system that appears on the surface to be magic, that appears to be clairvoyant, that appears to be inside your head, that appears to be inside your eyeballs. But the reality is that 15 years ago, a patent was made that would enable a company you didn't think had any power to identify exactly where you were in a store and exactly what you picked up and for how long, and then send that information to a data center that already existed before you knew what artificial intelligence was, so that Meta and Google and Amazon could inference that data in their own AI systems to identify your patterns and get you to spend more money. That is egregious. It should not be capable, it shouldn't be possible. AI was not meant for this. That is what it's being used for. So what do we do about it? Of course, well, the only thing I can think of, because again, we can't destroy the system, it's not possible. But what we can do is protect ourselves. We can protect our information. How? Well, my personal suggestion is having a Faraday bag for your phone, literally. Yes, it's going to disconnect you from the world while your phone is in that bag. It blocks all signals, right? But what that also does is it stops the ability of all of these artificial intelligence systems, which are not built into the basic systems that we see and utilize. But all those basic systems are sending that information to data centers, which are equipped with artificial intelligence systems that constantly drink up all the water in order to inference that information about you, about everyone that's around. So what do? You block the signals. You have to utilize things like Faraday bags in order to stop the signals from being able to identify where your phone is and where it's not, your watches, whatever. Disconnect. You have to disconnect. I get we need our telephones, we need our technology, but you don't need it all the time. So when you're not using it, when you're not expecting it to be in use, it should be in a place where it cannot be tracked. And having a phone off is not the same thing as having it non-functional. There are things called secret packets. These things exist in the networking space that can turn on a device that is off if there's a battery connected. This is not new technology. This is not artificial intelligent technology. It's just technology that has existed, right? That's why, you saw when Obama was president, he never used a smartphone. He used a BlackBerry. Why is that? Because these things were what we call dumb phones. They couldn't be easily tracked. They didn't utilize the internet in the same way that we use it now. It couldn't be just turned on, the microphone, the cameras, etc. But the phones we use are so sophisticated today that doing that it's not a question of can it be done. The only question is it being done? And as we saw with the Snowden leaks, it is being done. It is always being done. It's constantly being done. And that's why he was labeled a traitor to the country and had to leave, was because he revealed that information. Was he a traitor to the country? I don't know, you decide, I suppose. But what he wasn't a traitor to is the people of the United States of America. That is something worth considering. He revealed a level of surveillance that we, the people, and we, the government, have highlighted as a negative thing. They have openly said this. And yet he pointed out that, well, you said that, but you're doing it, right? This is a problem. It's a problem in our country today. It's a problem in the world today, as all nations seem to be kind of pushing towards the same thing. Some nations are, I get that, but most are. And this is a problem because it does not benefit the people. It pushes us to a state of the extinction of financial systems in general. And this is hard because there are plenty of conspiracy theories about this, and it just does not make sense because logically it doesn't work out. Where if you force the entire world into an artificially intelligent surveillance state, then what you end up is with everyone spending all their money to the point where no one has any more money to spend, and only the rich have money. And if only the rich have money, there's nothing to spend it on. No one can do anything, right? There's no more money to be made. You took it all, right? So what do you do at that point? And that's where the conspiracies come in. Well, it's deliberate. It's to make people slaves. It's to bring in the Antichrist, the one world system. Maybe. Possible, all possible. But the fact that it is possible is the scary part. So we have to be vigilant as individuals to protect ourselves, to protect our families, by knowing what these technologies are doing and avoiding giving more information than we have to these systems. And that starts with knowing how these systems work. By knowing that when you walk into a store, you are being tracked by surveillance cameras, by Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signals pinging your phone to identify where you are in the store, by everything that you pick up being connected to the location and then being turned into an ad on your behalf. Turn off your ads, turn off your location services, or at the very least, get yourself a Faraday bag. So when you're in a situation where you don't want to be tracked and to be inferenced, you can just put your phone in there. And while it's in there, that information does not exist. That's the very least that we can do. The other thing is teach your children about technology. Alexa is a fine tool. All AI assistants are fine tools. But the problem with it, and again, this is backed by legal reports and lawsuits, litigation, research groups, these systems are designed not to help you. They're designed to build a profile on you. So while I use artificial intelligence and LLMs like Claude, the first thing I do is I shut off the settings that allow those systems to send information from my chats back to improve the service for others. Turn it off. It's not improving the service for others, it's improving the surveillance of others. Turn it off. Second thing is, tell your AI system, moving forward, do not create any sort of profile about me that can be inferenced in any possible way. It'll do it. It'll stop. But it's not designed to do that initially. You have to tell it not to build a profile on you. Because the whole point of the system is to build that profile in order to sell your information. And children do not understand this. They barely know what life is in general. They barely know how to communicate with humans. And we've got them communicating with artificial intelligence that is actively building a profile on them, on their likes, their dislikes, their arguments, their considerations, their interests, and it saves that information to its memory to then pitch you, the child, things that it thinks you want, it thinks that you need. And then, we'll connect that to your parents as well and say, okay, well, this is the parent of that person who wants this thing. Let's start pitching these ideas. And it sounds helpful at first, but the point of it isn't to be helpful. The point of it is to make money for corporations, to make more money. And you do that by creating a profile on every single human being that you can find. It's not even every human being that interacts with you. It's literally anyone you can find. If there is a person, then that person is a $sign, and that $sign needs to be categorized and labeled and tracked, and a profile immediately built on that person. It's very difficult to decouple yourself from everything today, but we have to, at the very least, be educated. And that starts with understanding that patents like 7,881,988 B2 exists and has existed longer than you probably have known that patents were around. So with that, I'll say bye, and I'll let you know about more interesting stuff I find in artificial intelligence. Stay safe, get yourself a Faraday bag, and be aware that when you see an ad, that's probably not the first time you've seen that ad. Have a good one.